Now, this is one from a high school where they use this as a self-assessment tool for engagement with discourse. So many teachers now are saying, I just am seeing that the kids aren't engaging with discourse. I do, for example, they're interested in talking about critical issues, talking about some of the things like social justice and some of the things that are going on in current events. And I, as a social studies teacher, perhaps feel like this is a time when I could get them to really talk about it. So I get them going, and I find that when they're on remote, sometimes I see a lot of kids where I just find their name, I don't see the faces. I find some check out. I find some aren't really involved, and I'm not quite sure. And even when they're in class now, I'm finding it's harder to get them to really engage. So what I decided was I was going to use a fishbowl, and I was going to have observers and I was going to have students in a fishbowl. And we were going to work to see what engagement do we have with the discourse? How are we thinking about it? So this self-assessment tool, and by the way, it's a larger tool than this, and I've put it in the resources so that you can see it, use it, make it better. Let me know if you make it better, because it's one I'm experimenting with, but I've tried it out in a couple of places, and I'm finding that not only do students like to use this, but teachers are using this as a way of preparing themselves for discourse around critical issues, that they get into groups and they use this sometimes as part of a Socratic seminar. But here is the idea of it. The idea is that this is a continuum in which every place in the continuum is stated positively. So instead of saying, as some of the work that I've been doing this work with Giselle Martin Kniep and Alison Zamuda, and some of the ways that we've been looking at this is we see that so often people are saying things like, I want to make sure that students are in. So in the reflex zone, instead of calling it reflex, they'll call it isolated or not working. And what we started to say was, you know what? There are times when there's a benefit to just thinking to yourself. So we try to make every statement here as positive as possible along a continuum. So if you said, for example, I'm a high level introvert and I don't just jump into anything, so that's okay. You can benefit from taking some time to sit with yourself and consider the meaning before you jump in. So it says, I'm not going to have a negative presupposition. I'm going to assume people are in or would like to be in, but they're really paying attention to how they engage. The next one is observes, which is sometimes I just like to see what other people are doing. Some people call this lurking. But what it is basically, I need to be listening to how people are thinking so it can inform my thinking. And so I'm getting kind of ready perhaps to jump in. And then participates is now I'm ready perhaps to dialogue, to join, to be an active speaker or more active with my listening, because now I'm feeling safer. You know, this is a way of defining what we call that psychologically safe space. It's okay not to say something right away. And it's also okay to say something that may not be the most profound thing in the world, but what you want to do is you want to just hear your voice. You want to feel it's okay to participate, especially if there's no right or wrong answer and you're discussing a dilemma. We can have much more inclusive way of joining the discourse. And finally, when we're investing, it's not because we're right. It's not because our opinion is established. It's because we're good at sense making and summarizing and helping ourselves move the discourse along. So you notice that this is a way to begin to use this as an assessment tool, but not an assessment tool a teacher does. It's a self-assessment tool. So you will see that we ask reflective questions in each of these categories so that students can pay attention to where am I in engagement with discourse and where might I like to grow? How might I like to grow? For example, I would say some people who invest heavily in the beginning and perhaps they're sharing their opinions right away might say, you know what? Maybe I should step back a little bit and think a little bit more before I just engage. Maybe I need to get a little more reflective as well. So it's an interesting self assessment tool. Here's one from Pre-Calculus in Madison, Connecticut. And what he did was he said, what content do you feel that you need more growth in? Now, that's really interesting because up to this point, he was very skeptical. What do you mean self assessment in pre calculus? What do you really think that the kids are going to talk about? How they solve problems? Do you really? I'm just not sure it fits in pre calculus. And with a little encouragement, he came up with a couple of questions. And I just took this one because I thought it showed so well what's possible. Because if you notice, he said, the student says, I need to keep practice on testing for symmetry because the one I did not really understand it until right before the test. And he goes on to say he got it wrong. And here's why he got it wrong. But we highlighted what was most important here. However, if I really understood it, I would have realized that X and Y are opposite sides of Y-axis, therefore, a reflection over Y, deeming it to have symmetry with respect to the Y-axis symmetry. And the teacher, David Buller, says, that's a great conceptual learning. Surely, sorry you didn't have that for the test, but thrilled you have it now. So isn't that lovely that you can have a commentary and an engagement with the student, encouraging and fostering the power of that self-assessment and reflection?